Welcome back, everybody. We got some breaking news as a diehard college football fan. Brendan Sorsby is entering the supplemental draft. There's two things that I want to really break down in this short breaking news video. What does this mean for Sorsby and Texas Tech and college football? Because this was going to get messy real quick and like a blink of an eye quick. Sorsby, it was last week that he was allowed to play, and it was looking like this week, the end of this week, the Big 12 was going to take action, like officially take action and take this into federal court. It looked like it was going to be a week and a half, 2 weeks before this was going to go to federal court, and that is, I hate to say it, that's insane. That's something I would never think I would have to say over a single player in the college sports world. Over something that was a law broken, not in day-to-day life, like college football rules, like sports rules. Something that you know as a 10-year-old not to do. It's like I said, it's the worst of the worst thing you can do under the grand scheme and the landscape of college football and their rules. That isn't murdering somebody or something like that. Gambling on your team. That is the basics of the basics not to do. Gambling on your team, the team that you played for, and the games that you were in. And that was going to be taken to the highest ranks in the court system over one decision. Sorsby took all these classes and stuff, these mental health classes and sports gambling because he bet over 60,000 times. But, I said that I feel like it was just to help him in the court case, to help him show that he's making an attempt to try to play and get better. But he didn't take this while he was in the middle of his crisis, in the middle of his gambling addiction. He took this after this became public, which was definitely a little fishy because I thought that was going to help him in the court case with his lawyer and stuff. And it did because he ended up winning. I don't know where the NCAA goes. They got to get the injunctions out of the college football scheme and things. These injunctions, all they do is grant people to play. So why the Big 12? The Big 12, it was reported, I think today's Tuesday, so yesterday and Sunday, that Big 12, they met together, the 12 teams met together, and they were going to take this to federal court. And I don't think Texas Tech wanted to go through that. I don't think they were prepared to go through that, even though they knew what they signed up for. Not when they first went after Sorsby and got him to transfer, because this came in after he transferred, but they knew what they signed up for after it was announced that Sorsby was allowed to play. These injunctions, like I said, they only allow players to be granted to play, so you could take this to federal court, but like I said, the NCAA is just 4 words, 4 letters. They don't have that much power. I felt like, it seemed like the conferences, when you put $12 billion schools together, that they had more power than the college sports name and brand. So this is so weird. I talked about it. This is so weird because the NCAA oversees every sport, from water polo to college football. Why does it not have the ultimate power? Why does it just come to a judge saying yes or no, he can play, she can play, yes or no, they can play, in the state, in the town that college is located in? All you got to do is bribe the judge a little bit. Like I said, the judge that allowed Sorsby granted Sorsby to play, he was a Houston graduate from Fort Worth, Texas. Houston and TCU's in Fort Worth, are rivals, in-state rivals, in-conference rivals. He wasn't a Texas Tech grad. The first judge that was supposed to be seeing this case was a Texas Tech grad, then he stepped down. So that means, what does that mean? That means that somewhere in the whole grand scheme of things, looking through the muddy water, that some way. He didn't just say, oh, yeah, he can play. Like, he had to have been bribed. I don't really know how to explain it. It's just anybody with 2 brain cells knows that he had to have been bribed. That's here nor there because Sorsby's now entering the supplemental draft. What is the supplemental draft? It is teams. It's like Russian roulette. It's like bidding. You can bid as many picks as you want, but if Sorsby does go to that team, get drafted by that team, Sorsby isn't a free agent. He gets drafted. He doesn't get to pick where he goes. Especially, that would be so messed up if he entered this after breaking the worst rule that you can in college football and then just pick whichever team. So, there's ping pong balls. It's like the NBA. They draw it. It's based off of last draft in April. So the Raiders have 32 balls because there's 32 teams in there. So they have the highest odds. 32 ping pong balls, and the Jets have 31, this and that. You can put as many draft picks as you want, but if Sorsby does go to that team, which has the highest draft picks and the most draft picks, you don't have those draft picks for the upcoming season. So say the Seahawks do put in a first-round draft pick, it's not as heavily rated as the Raiders' first-round draft pick because the Raiders were higher up. But if the Seahawks do put in their draft pick, they were 32 last year. Say they are the worst team next year, they don't have the number 1 overall draft pick. And then Sorsby, whichever draft pick he gets, so it's not multiple draft picks. You can bid as many draft picks as you want. It's just whichever team has the highest draft pick. So if the Raiders do want to go for Sorsby, they're not going to. I'm going to use the Raiders because it's the most easiest to understand because they had the number 1 overall draft pick. But if they did put in their first-round draft pick, they wouldn't have it for next year. But that means since that's the best pick in the draft from last year, they get the first bid. That means they would get Sorsby. So it's the best draft pick, the best number. So the lowest number that is bid, that's where Sorsby ends up. I'm not good at explaining, but I hope I can explain that good enough. So the lower the number, the better chance you have. So say the Jets bid pick number 232, but the Seahawks bid pick number 131. The Seahawks have a better chance, and the Seahawks would get Sorsby because they have the lower number. The lower number means better because it's closer to the number 1 overall draft pick. That's just common sense in the draft scheme and things. This is where it's interesting. I'm going to use the Raiders again. So the Raiders have the number 1 overall draft pick. They're not going to pick Sorsby. They have their franchise guy, Fernando Mendoza. Just say they didn't have Mendoza or just say they wanted a backup. Whatever they paid that draft. So say the Raiders put in their number 1 overall draft pick. That means they would get Sorsby because that's the best draft pick there is. They would have to pay Sorsby what they paid Mendoza. So whichever draft pick you used to get Sorsby, you have to pay Sorsby that amount of money that you paid the guy that you made the pick with that same amount of money. So say Mendoza got $10 million coming out of the draft. The Raiders put in the number 1 overall draft pick, they get Sorsby. They have to pay him $10 million. They can't lowball him. They have to pay him what they paid the kid that they got in April with that same amount of money. So, the Raiders are not going to do it because they lose their next year's number 1 overall draft or next year's first-round draft pick. They have their quarterback, and then they also are losing cap space. So you're going to be like, well, why don't the Jets go for somebody? They need a quarterback. They have to pay. They're basically taking on 2 number 2 overall draft picks in the cap space. B, Sorsby's not a franchise quarterback. Hate to say it. He struggled in the Big Ten. He went to the Big 12 and lit it up because the Big 12 is not that good of defenses. And then C, they lose their number 1 overall draft or their first-round draft picks next year, which could be number 1 overall because the Jets are trash. So that means there's just I don't know where that draft pick goes. I think it's just gone. I think there's just going to be no draft pick. So maybe there's no number 1 overall draft pick because maybe the Jets, I'm just thinking this off the top of my head. Say the Jets use their first-round draft pick, then they end up with the number 1 overall draft pick next year. There's no number 1 overall draft pick. That means the number 2 overall draft pick, the second worst team will have the number 1 overall draft pick. I'm assuming that's how it works. That's just random shower thoughts coming in the middle while I'm making this, but maybe somebody let me know in the comments. I think that's how it's going to work, but who knows? I guess the number 2 overall draft pick would be considered the number 1 overall. I don't know. I'm just yapping off the top of my head. On the Sorsby side of things, he's got a big uphill battle. He's lost a lot of trust from everybody. These GMs, these owners, these coaches, they want somebody that's trustworthy. It doesn't seem like Sorsby's going to relapse because he was doing this in his Indiana days when he was a backup, not when he was starting and not when he was at Cincinnati. So he's had a couple years to mature, but still, I think this is for his safety also. Like I said, you never know what those college kids could do if they find out what hotel he's in. You never know. He could get critically injured on the sideline or staying off the field just because of this. And there's still going to be publicity for Texas Tech, but it's not as much outsized noise now. You have to focus on who's your quarterback now. He's played a couple of games, including a meaningful on the road at Arizona State game that they ended up losing, but he's played against the best of the best teams in the Big 12 and against tough road environments. It'll be interesting because they do go to Oregon State week 2. That's an underratedly loud environment, so I'm assuming it's going to be sold out. Those Oregon State fans, they are diehard fans. Win or lose, they're going to show up. So that'll be interesting to see. I would wonder if he would struggle there. And, of course, week 3 at home. Good thing it's at home. But against Houston, a dark horse team, a team that is predicted to be top 5, maybe even top 3, or even be in the Big 12 championship. I think this might, most people are saying, oh, it's not going to switch my view on Texas Tech. I still think they're going to win the conference. I think Houston and BYU now have, those are my second and third place teams that I think are going to be competing with Texas Tech. I think they do have a leg up. I would watch out for BYU. I would think, I haven't looked at their schedule. I'm also really high on Oklahoma State, but I could see Oklahoma State, BYU, not as much as Houston, but Oklahoma State or BYU taking the leap up, and maybe even my prediction, just coming off the top of my head, maybe BYU winning the conference. But that's just ranting. I'm going to get more into this later. Thank you, guys. I will see you next time.